Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my guide for the Python. The Python is one of the fastest firing guns in the entire game. It's pretty useful on many Descendants, and we're going to be talking about how to build it and also giving you guys a direct comparison for the Thundercage and talking about the use case scenarios and which one is better overall. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. So the very first thing to talk about is the Python's unique ability called Prey. Now, I don't have mine fully maxed up yet. I've got it 3 out of 4. This thing is a bit of a challenge to actually grind out, but its Prey ability is very helpful on a lot of Descendants. Basically, as you hit weak points, which this thing will be built entirely towards, it really doesn't have very good crit chance stats or crit damage stats, so I've personally built mine entirely focusing on weak point damage. But as you hit weak points with its incredibly fast fire rate, you're going to be building up resistance shred. You're getting toxic resistance shred and non-attribute resistance shred. This makes it really great for characters like Freyna, like Valby. Glay utilizes this with her ultimate because Glay's ultimate bases off of your base weapon's fire rate. Glay likes this weapon a lot. Ajax can use this weapon and so many more. So this ability is very nice. In my opinion, after messing around with it, it doesn't feel very good at a rank 1 out of 1. You're really going to want to upgrade this thing. And the main reason for that is every time you upgrade it, the duration of the stacks lasts longer. So at a 4 out of 4 upgrade, you're going to get two seconds of its duration on its stacks. And if you're firing for a long time, you can keep those stacks up while also enemies get ticked down by your Valby dots or your Freyna dots. Next up, we've got a little bit of a side-by-side comparison for the Python versus the Thundercage. Now, the Python has slightly less base damage. It has significantly higher fire rate than the Thundercage, boasting 923 fire rate, which is one of the highest in the game. It's not the fastest firing weapon in the game, versus the Thundercage's 666 fire rate. It's got slightly more rounds in the mag. It's got slightly worse reload time. It's got much worse critical hit rate and much worse critical hit damage. And it's got a lot better weak point damage. The Thundercage is obviously a weapon that is built very easily around crit, versus the Python is a much easier time to build around weak point. And that is kind of our head-by-head comparison. So next up, we're going to do a little bit of just like a head-to-head comparison. I've basically fully modded my Python and pretty much fully modded my Thundercage. So we're just going to do a comparison. I'm on a pretty neutral character, which is our Lepic. He's just built for some HP and some firearm attack damage. We're going to do our first run with our Python build, and then we'll do another run with our Thundercage just to show you a quick comparison. Just to show you the builds that I had on these two weapons, this was my Python build, which we'll be talking about in a second, and this was my Thundercage build. I put both with full electric enhancement. I didn't quite able to fit a legendary mod on my Thundercage for that specific test, so I was missing out on firing Fiesta or real life fighter, which actually would have made it do even more damage. I would have replaced our insight focus with something like firing Fiesta, but just wanted to show you the two setups. Now, to talk about the Python and some potential builds with it, the first thing I want to show you guys is something that I thought would have been really cool, but unfortunately doesn't quite work. So Freyna, which the Python would work pretty well with, has a mod called Neurotoxin Synthesis, which drastically increases the damage of her dots. I probably need to make another video updating our Freyna build with this thing because it's kind of nuts. Just to show you, for example, my one ability goes to a 208% damage multiplier on its dot. And if I take that off, the base dot is 93. It's base 10, but I'm modifying it up to 93. And then when it spreads, it's 143. So adding that neurotoxin is kind of insane for the inherent single target damage. But the big issue with it is that it doesn't spread, kind of removing the ability for Freyna to do mobbing efficiently. But There's a mod called Venom Injector that when you defeat an enemy inflicted with poison, inflict poison on other enemies. And I was gonna make a like poison Python build, which you'd use like toxic enhancement, high fire rate, and Venom Injector with Freyna with this dot that's really powerful, and then spread it with the Python. And I thought that was gonna be a really cool build. Unfortunately, that does not work. The reason for that is the Python, when it spreads the dot, doesn't actually spread the dot that Freyna puts on enemies. It spreads its own inherent dot. So let's see if I like can damage this guy. So he's getting ticked for like 36k. And if we spread that, the dot goes from 36k to 1,417. And that's because it's spreading my weapon dot. And the other thing that makes the Python like not a very good dot weapon, I've done a lot of testing with dots on weapons and trying to like build up a dot weapon, which we're going to be talking about with the Enduring Legacy. But the damage that your dot procs off of actually scales the dot damage inherently. So I've found the best damage over time, like elemental weapons, to actually be crit weapons, because if you crit with your weapon, that dot that procs from the crit will actually get drastically scaled. So you can get dots ticking on weapons for 4 to 5 times the damage if you have a crit weapon. And unfortunately, the Python makes for a really bad crit weapon, so it's just not a very good elemental weapon, if that makes sense. So now let's talk about our Python setup. This is kind of our core on it. It unfortunately comes with a few R polarities. These polarities on weapons, I think, are basically the most useless polarities in the game. So the fact that the Python has 2 of them is pretty unfortunate. If you wanted to mod these off, you absolutely could. But the core of the Python that we're going to be talking about is putting on rifling reinforcement and action and reaction for tons of base damage. We're going to obviously be modding as much weak point damage as we can, because this thing has great weak point damage. We can only add to that. We're going to be using expand weapon charge with fire rate so that we can fire more, and firing Fiesta feels like a must-have mod with this thing because it absolutely chews through ammo. Once again, like just to show you what this fire rate looks like when we reload. It fires very quickly. It also sounds pretty awesome, which is a lot of fun. Now, depending on what character you're using this on, you can add to this. For example, there's 2 Descendants that can turn this into a crit weapon. Freyna, or sorry, not Freyna. Enzo and Valby with Supply Moisture and Enzo's Transcendent module for his 1 allow you to turn the Python into a crit weapon. So if you wanted to use this weapon on them, I'd recommend keeping a similar base, but then adding your crit modules. So you could add things like your edging shot if you wanted to, insight focus, obviously your better concentration and better insight. I'd probably go better concentration, better insight, and like concentration priority would feel pretty good. You could throw edging shot if you wanted to, but if you are playing those Descendants, you can absolutely invest into crit. I didn't want to make this a build guide for just one Descendant though, so this is kind of like a general really good base for it. And then in the other sockets, what I'm using right now, because the Python is a weak point weapon and it's not a crit weapon, it basically goes from a ton of damage to 0 damage if you're not hitting a weak point. So I had a lot of fun just putting, because it already came with these R mods. Obviously, you could take them off if you wanted to, but I had a ton of fun just putting on accuracy mods, which make it really, really reliable for breaking weak points on bosses. As you can see, when we aim down sights with these accuracy mods, we turn the Python into an absolute laser beam, which is really, really cool. And then obviously the last slot here is you'd want to put on an element. Elements are a massive game changer for bossing damage. So for like with this setup here, I'd put on my electrical enhancement, and then I could put my fire rate mod right there. And that's kind of like the finished build that I've been using a lot. And obviously, if you wanted to swap this for like toxic, then you could put toxic enhancement. Oh, I gotta take off our element. Wrong one. But you could put toxic there and then swap them out and so on and so forth. And I made sure to leave 1 open slot, so if you want to put like fire or chill, you can do that as well. So now I just kind of want to show you what the effect of the weapon looks like. We've got enemies that are going to be very toxic, which means that they should have a high toxic resistance. My weapon obviously shreds toxic resistance. So to show you the difference of using a Python on an enemy with dot damage and not, this is our dot right now. It's going to be taking for 32k right now on Freyna. Just kind of using a very, very simple build. Just maximize skill and power for lots of damage there. So ticking for 32k, and then we're going to build up full stacks on this guy's head, and then show you the difference of that like resistant shred. So there's our 32k, shoot a bunch. We're at 34k, shoot a bunch. Got to 36k. So we're adding about 4,000 dot damage from doing full resistant shred stacks. Obviously, the higher the damage that you're doing to an enemy, the more the Python shred will do, and it shreds more resistances for non-attributes. So like it's going to be a higher resistance shred or a damage increase for someone like Valby than it will Freyna. But just wanted to give you guys an example. So we're going from 32k, 33k, 35k, 36k, 36k. So yeah, we're adding about 4k damage there onto our dot ticks. So not like the world's craziest thing. For the substats on the Python, your god roll would be weak point damage, percentage firearm damage, damage to Colossus, and probably like toxic damage or rounds per mag. I'd probably prefer toxic damage just because this thing already like debuffs for toxic, so having a little element associated with it is pretty nice. Obviously, there isn't like a non-attribute element, so toxic is kind of your best choice there. Guys, that is going to do it for our little build guide on the Python. Overall, if you have to pick to invest into one between the Thundercage or the Python, I think the Thundercage is just better all around than the Python personally, because it can build into crit and it's more versatile. If you are specifically going to be using one of these weapons on Enzo or Valby, you can make the Python into a crit weapon and turn it into a bit of a monster. However, in case you're very specifically doing that, I wouldn't like build this thing for crit ever. And also, like, other weapons that are already good at crit are only going to get better at crit on those specific descendants. Particularly, like, Valby already debuffs for lightning damage with the Thundercage, so like I'd put the Thundercage on her anyways over the Python. Just personally, I have found as I've played more and more weapons that the ability to build crit damage on weapons just becomes more and more valuable, mainly because of the way that the modding system works is you can only have a certain amount of mods. So it's not like I can fill this thing up with entirely weak point damage mods, because eventually you kind of run into a bit where you kind of have to put on either crit mods or quality of life mods like magazine size or accuracy or things like that. So yeah, just my 2 cents on the Python. I do think this is probably the best in slot weapon for Glaze 4 ability with Massacre, but unless you're very specifically building into that, I would be a little bit more cautious with investing into this thing. Guys, that is going to do it for our guide. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.